Continuing to read Ben Franklin's In My Bathroom by Candace Fleming, today starting with Chapter 11. It didn't take long for a crowd to gather. Neighbors, passerby, even the Long John Shivers ice cream guy. Within minutes, his truck blaring, "Yo ho ho," from a speaker atop its roof, pulled over to the curb. I guess gapers buy ice cream. Fire Chief Sid was there too, looking like he was about to have a complete meltdown. So were some of the other firefighters from the station. The three of us stood stiffly in one spot as the chief, his men, and Officer Niddles walked around and around the truck, inspecting it for damage. From behind us came the static and chatter of the police car's radio. The radio, it felt like 100 years ago that the mysterious package had arrived, followed by Ben, followed by that big Snoop Tommy, followed by this. H, I muttered under my breath. Who was he? Why had he sent me that radio? His gift, if that's what it was supposed to be, had brought nothing but trouble, big trouble. Finally, Officer Nettles returned to us. She pulled out her notebook. "Want to tell me what happened?" "They crashed my truck," barked Chief Sid. "I'd like to hear what they have to say," said Officer Nettles. My stomach churned. I was dizzy. All day long, no, all summer long, since Dad left, I've been trying to hold things together. But it was all unraveling now. A lump grew in my throat. "There's nothing to say," I said at last. Officer Niddles looked at Ben and Olive. "What about you two?" "We didn't mean to do it," explained Olive. "I merely want to sit in that marvelous conveyance for a moment," added Ben. "We accidentally bumped a stick and it just started moving," Olive went on. "I am, I confess, woefully unfamiliar with the workings of your modern vehicle," said Ben. Olive nodded. "He's really old." She paused a second and then added, "And I'm only 7. Officer Nettles raised her eyebrows. "Anything else?" I like your shoes," said Olive. I swore Officer Nettles almost smiled, but it didn't change anything. She gestured for Chief Sid to join her by her squad car. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I figured it wasn't good. Their expressions were serious, and their heads were bent close together. Chief Sid was doing most of the talking. Officer Niddles took lots of notes. I broke into a cold sweat. How many years did a person get for stealing a fire truck anyway? I'd grow thin on bread and water. I'd have to wear an orange jumpsuit, even though orange is not a good color for me. It makes me look like a squash. Mom's next book would be titled, "The Bumble Bunnies Break Their Mother's Heart." I was trembling by the time Officer Nettles returned to us. "Time to go for a little ride, you three," she said. I could feel my eyes getting wet. Beside me, Olive started sniffling. Ben patted her arm. Okay, but could you do us a favor, please?" I wiped my nose on my sleeve of my t-shirt. "Could you wait until we're in the car to handcuff us? It would be humiliating to be handcuffed in front of all these people." Officer Niddles' face grew puzzled. "Handcuffs are for people who are under arrest." I winced. "I know. You're not being arrested," she said. Not that what you did wasn't serious, but no one was hurt and no damage was done. Chief Sid has agreed not to press charges." I couldn't believe it. I looked over at Chief Sid. He nodded. "You're not taking us to jail?" exclaimed Olive. "I'm taking you home," said Officer Niddles. "I want to talk with your parents about your stupid stunt." "Parent," I said. "Just our mom." And she was going to be so disappointed in me. Officer Niddles opened the back door of the squad car. She put her hand on my shoulder. "Time to go." The three of us slid into the back seat and slumped down. Just then, Miss Missy and the little day camp kids rounded the corner. I guess it had taken her that long to get them back into 2x2 order. "Hey!" cried Kevin. He took his finger out of his nose and pointed. "The old man is going to jail." "That's dumb," said Paulie, frowning at Officer Niddles. Then he raised a little fist in his hair and, smiling at Ben, shouted, "Free the old man!" The others raised their little fists too. As we pulled away, our ears filled with the chant, "Free the oat man! Free the oat man! Free the oat man!" "Corn!" cried Clarence. Chapter 12. In case you're wondering, the backseat of a police car stinks. It's a disgusting blend of pine air freshener and sweat from hundreds of bad guys. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the car's smell. Fear makes me queasy. And just thinking about Mom's response when she saw the police at her door made me want to puke. I put my hand over my mouth. My mother is not a reasonable person about stuff like this. Like someday we will never, ever look back on this day and laugh. Beside me, Olive said weakly, "It's all over. 7 years of being the perfect child down the toilet." She pretended to flush. Poosh! For once, Ben was quiet. His head was bowed, his toy fire hat lying on his lap. Somewhere he'd lost his fur cap. The fire station, maybe. Now that he was hatless, I could see a big pink bald spot on top of his head. He must have felt me staring because he turned and said, "I am sorry about this, Nolan, truly." He touched my sleeve. "My enthusiasms do run away with me at times." I couldn't answer because my hands still covered my mouth. Instead, I looked out the window. The squad car turned onto my street. Officer Nettles pulled up in front of our house, then turned to look at us through the wire mesh that separated the front and back seats. "Is this it?" I nodded glumly. She got out of the car and opened the back seat door. "We're dead," I groaned. "Before I ever got to Disney World," muttered Olive. I sat there. "The sooner we do this, the sooner it's done," said Officer Nettles. She was right. Straightening my shoulders, I jumped out of the car and strode toward the house, boldly at first, then slower and slower, until I came to a complete stop. I turned and looked back. Ben took Olive's hand. Olive took a deep breath. Then side by side, we began the long, nervous walk to the front door. Officer Nettles rang the bell. We waited. "Are you sure your mother's home?" Officer Nettle asked. I nodded glumly. "She's home. She's just working." "She's blank," added Olive. "What?" began Officer Nettles. Then she shook her head. "Forget it." She rang the doorbell again. And after what seemed like a year, Mom answered the door. She looked from Olive to me, to Officer Nettles, to Ben. And the expression on her face went from surprise to worry to outright confusion. And then she held open the door, and we all stepped into the entry hall. "What's this all about?" Mom asked. "Is everyone all right?" "Your children and their friend here were picked up this afternoon," said Officer Nettles. "Picked up?" Mom repeated. "They were involved in a traffic incident," said Officer Nettles. Flipping open her notebook, she started telling our mother about our stupid stunt. The look on Mom's face was downright scary. Her eyes became slits. Her cheeks were sucked almost completely into her head. I'd never seen her look so furious. Jail was starting to look really good. I tried blurting out the truth. "Mom, I can explain. It all started this morning when Ben Franklin popped up." Olive broke in. "Popped up," said Mom. "Ben Franklin." Officer Nettles nodded. Mr. Franklin's fascination with fire trucks is what precipitated the incident," she stated. "For which I am abjectly sorry," said Ben. He leaned toward my mother. "I am, you know, the founder of the first fire company in the American colonies." Mom blinked. "He made the first library, too," Olive piped up. "And discovered electricity," I added. Officer Nettles consulted her notebook. "Mr. Franklin gave a performance at the public library earlier today," she stated. Mom looked into each of our faces one by one. The muscles in her face started to relax. "I see," she finally said. Then she did the weirdest thing. She smiled, and it wasn't one of those tight-lipped, "I'm so going to kill my kid when this person is gone" smiles either. It was a genuine, friendly smile. And honestly, it made me queasier than if she had gone ballistic. I mean, I expected her to start yelling and lecturing me about acting responsibly. I'd braced myself for being grounded forever, or at least until I was 30 and too old to enjoy life. But she didn't even stare at me like she was going to figure out what had gone wrong with my upbringing. She was just smiling through the rest of the policewoman's account. A couple times she even giggled. It was weird. At last, Officer Nettles snapped her notebook shut. "Obviously, we won't be pressing charges on this occasion. We'd rather not take it any further if it can be dealt with at home." "Oh, yes, of course," said Mom with a chuckle. She lowered her voice and added, "You make a very convincing policewoman." "Pardon?" said Officer Nettles. Mom winked. "You had me there for a minute, but I get it now. I know what's going on." "I'm glad you grasped the situation," said Officer Nettles. "Oh, yes," said Mom, "I certainly do. Then I expect you'll keep a close eye on these three." "Absolutely," said Mom. The policewoman left. And Mom whirled. You never do quit, do you, Nolan? Oh, you sweet, sweet boy, she cried. Opening her arms wide, she wrapped all of us, even Ben, into a big family hug. You are the best children in the world. What did I do to deserve you? What? She punctuated the whats with kisses, one for each of us. Ben liked this a lot, I could tell, because when she finally let go, his eyes were twinkling and his lips were puckered up like he was expecting another smooch. Enchanté, madame, he said, eyebrows wagging. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Benjamin Franklin of Philadelphia. Of course you are, Mom giggled, and I'm Betsy Ross. Surely you jest, madam, replied Ben Franklin. I know Betsy Ross, and you are most certainly not she. He turned to Olive and me. Mistress Ross is a stout woman, and her hair... Mom giggled again. The three of us looked at one another. What was happening? Nolan, you're too much, Mom gushed. First that bunny costume, and now this. Waving toward Ben, she giggled a third time. What an inspired idea. The Bumble Bunnies meet Benjamin Franklin. Why didn't I think of it myself? All this time, I've only thought about the bunnies in the modern world. Why not that set them in history? She snapped her fingers. Wait, I have it, a new series. In each book, they'll meet a famous American, Amelia Earhart, Dolly Madison, Abraham Lincoln. That fellow again, said Ben with a sniff. It's good, huh? Squealed Mom. Good, I said. I was feeling very confused. She looked longingly toward her studio, then back at us. First I'll make you some supper, then it's back to work. Thanks to you, it seems I've suddenly got a book to write. We can handle supper, I said. But I should, she began. Madam, said Ben, one today is worth two tomorrows. Olive nodded. What he said. We've got this one, I added. Ben made a sick face. Do promise me, Nolan, that you shall not serve those sticks and stones again. Sprouts and stuff, I corrected him, and I promise. Mom hurried up the stairs, but at her studio doorway she stopped. Will you be staying long? She asked Ben. I hope to be departing for 1784 shortly, he replied. Mom giggled and disappeared into her studio. By the collision of luck and opportunity, sparks are struck and light is obtained, said Ben. He smiled. You have made your mother very happy, Nolan. It was like some kind of a miracle or something. Chapter 13. Now what? Asked Olive. She was staring at the spot on the kitchen table where the crystal radio used to be. I flopped into a chair. We have to get it back. That's what. But how? No way was Tommy going to just hand it over. We need a plan, I said. We stared at each other. I know, Olive shouted about a minute later. We can be ninjas and sneak up on him and... She karate chopped the air. Hi-ya! That'll work, I said. We stared at each other some more. Disguises, Olive shouted. We'll disguise ourselves and steal back the radio. That's a good plan, huh? We can wear our costumes from last Halloween. Oh, sure, I said with a snort. A mummy, a mermaid princess, and a founding father strolling down the sidewalk. No one's going to notice that. She stuck out her tongue at me. We went back to staring. But a minute later, hypnotize him, attack him with water pistols, catch him in a giant butterfly net, drop an iron cage over him, jump on him with jet-propelled pogo sticks. Oh, brother, Ben smiled. Those are all most ingenious plans, Olive, he said. But there are times when brains are preferred to brawn. Huh? Asked Olive. I think Ben means he has a plan, I said. Ben's eyes twinkled. Indeed I do, young Nolan. What are you going to do? Asked Olive, jumping up and down. He who can have patience can have what he will, said Ben. In the meantime, this is what I need from you and Nolan. And then he sent us scurrying all over the house for bits and parts and pieces. After a few trips, we had collected a big pile of stuff on the kitchen floor. There were scraps of wire, a roll of tin foil, and a silk scarf. There were 2 bent curtain rods, a broken waffle iron, a set of metal salt and pepper shakers shaped like the Empire State Building, 2 knitting needles, 5 brass thimbles, an assortment of glass jars, and a hand crank ice cream maker. There was also a saw and a hammer, nuts and bolts, a screwdriver, a bent silver fork, and a bamboo fishing pole. Ben snapped the fishing pole in half and wrapped one end with tinfoil. A makeshift cane of sorts, he said with a grin. Then he set to work connecting and fastening the other items. Screwdriver, if you please, Nolan, he said, holding out his hand like a surgeon in an operating room. Olive, will you be so kind as to place your finger here so I may tie this knot? Together we yanked and jimmied and pulled away the waffle iron's metal plates and fit them inside the ice cream maker. As we worked, an unexpected feeling, part happy, part sad, came over me. I remember the time Dad and I had put together my first bicycle. After a few more minutes, Ben waved at his invention. I give you the electrostatic machine. What's it do? Asked Olive. Allow me to demonstrate. Ben cranked the ice cream maker's handle. A low humming came from the whirling waffle iron plates inside. The 2 glass jars we'd mounted on top began to vibrate. Then sizzle, snap. Blue sparks appeared, and they bounced and crackled inside the jar. Pretty, gushed Olive. It's like a little lightning, I said. It is lightning, although man-made. Indeed, lad, it really is nothing more than a parlor trick. Would you like to try? He handed me one of the knitting needles. How? Merely hold it near, he said, gesturing. I held the needle out slowly. When it got within an inch of the machine, the tiny blue-white bolt of electricity leaped from the glass jars to the tip of my needle. Instantly, I felt a tingling in my hand. I jumped back, dropping the needle. Did it hurt? I asked Olive. I shook my head. Not really. It was just a surprise. I call it a kiss, said Ben. An electric kiss. I want to try, said Olive. She grabbed a knitting needle. A second later, little lightning bolts were flashing toward her. Ooh, tingly, she said. She held the needle in place. Kiss me again. Snap, sizzle, zap. Enough now, Olive, said Ben. We still have work to do. He turned to me. Might you have a grip sack or satchel about? A what? I asked. Oh, wait, I know, cried Olive. She raced to her bedroom and returned with her Princess Aquamarina shimmer and sparkle backpack. The mermaid's tail twinkled and flashed with every step she took. She held it up so Ben could see. You mean something like this? Exactly, he said. May I? Olive handed it to him. What's that for? I asked. Ben gestured for us to come close. He whispered his plan. That idea is almost as good as a giant butterfly net, Olive exclaimed when she was done. I wasn't so sure. This won't be like the turkey experiment you told us about earlier, will it? You know, when you electrocuted yourself? Fear not, dear boy, Ben reassured me. I am highly experienced in the delivery of electrical kisses. I have often used a similar strategy to scatter the gawkers gathered in front of my house. He paused a moment before adding, I electrified my wrought iron fence. Bzzz! Shrieked Olive. She stiffened and shook as if a shock of electricity were running through her body. Hardly as severe as that, replied Ben, making some adjustments to the backpack. No, sweet Olive, my kisses are always harmless. People often squeal and jump, but they are never hurt. We will continue and finish reading Ben Franklin's In My Bathroom by Candace Fleming.